this question. I'm asking you now to vote. I want you to all go to pollev.com/PatrickRyan800, and you are basically deciding whether or not you agree with the assertion that for our open source development, we should focus on web-based front-end tools to enable broader adoption. Or if you disagree, if you think instead we should focus on R package backend development for advanced large-scale analytics, then you should vote for that. And if you are uncertain, you can vote I don't know. What I want you to do is go to pollev.com/PatrickRyan800 and start voting about your opinion about things.
And Patrick, what about D, both? What is that? Where's that?
We are debating a topic, Christian, which means you got to get off the fence and choose one of these two alternatives. Oops, that went to the wrong screen. I'm going to see if I can pull this over to see how we're doing on our vote here. There we go. All right. So you all are voting at pollev.com/PatrickRyan800. We're choosing between our priorities for open source development. Do we focus on web-based front ends or do we focus on R package backends? Right now, the community is leaning towards a focus on web-based front ends. About a third of you all are thinking we should focus on our R package backends, and 10% of you are not quite sure. All right. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our debaters. Our topic here today will be debated. The affirmative will be argued by Adam Black, and the negative will be argued by Jamie Gilbert. So Adam, your 5 minutes starts as soon as I see you're off of mute. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay. So today let me start my clock here. Today we're debating where the focus of Odysseus open source software development efforts should be. R package backends or web-based UI front end. I'm representing the web-based UI front end perspective. In Odyssey, many of our R package backends are in a collection called Hades, and our main open source web UI is Atlas. What I aim to convince you of is that rather than treat these as competing tool sets, we should be building a bridge between them so that we can leverage all the great work that's been done in Hades in Atlas. So this change would require significant effort and investment, and re-architecting Atlas to make it modular and plugin friendly, but it would put Atlas on a path to become the preeminent application for doing observational data analytics. I like to think about software kind of like a sculptor and ask what can be removed to bring the software closer to what it truly wants to be. What's the true essence of the Odyssey software architecture? We already have a lot of the core components in place. It's a layered interface that includes a graphical user interface for the design of standardized analyses, JSON specifications that are highly transportable across the Odyssey network and highly stable across time. The JSON specifications are then rendered into executable code that's executed in a standard runtime environment. The results from one or more CDM databases are then saved in a results data model and can be shared with collaborators or explored through interactive tables and visualizations. I think a big problem with the Atlas architecture is that it's hard to change and extend. There are many reasons for this, but at the top of my mind would just be the sheer amount of knowledge that a programmer has to have in order to safely make changes or additions. What's needed is an extendable plugin-based architecture that would allow developers outside of Odyssey to create Atlas plugins. Each plugin would follow the same basic layered pattern and would require a minimal understanding of the Atlas codebase. The Odyssey developers would be responsible for maintaining the core application, and the plugin developers would be responsible for just their components. The there are many more R and Python developers in our community than there are enterprise Java developers. So we should encourage those developers to scratch their own itch and empower them to get their features into Atlas through optional plugins. I'm not suggesting that we slow down our package development at all, or compete with, or have that compete with Atlas development. I think the analytic R package development and enterprise Java application development are very different skill sets and done by different groups of people. On the contrary, I'm arguing for an investment into Atlas that would allow R and Python developers to easily add optional feature sets. There's no doubt that this change would require a lot of effort and expertise, but the benefit would be a whole ecosystem of analytic tooling through a web-based UI. And that concludes my opening statement.
Thank you, Adam. JPEG, you are taking the position of R package backends and going to square off against our current reigning open source titan. You've got 5 minutes. As I
Thank
see
you,
you
Patrick.
off of the, there you go. All right, JPEG, on your way.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Adam. So I'd like to begin by saying I really respect Adam and all the work he does for the OHDSI community, as well as Web API and the Atlas development. However, I mean, no apologies for any damage I'm about to do now. So we have a huge need for disparate packages within the OHDSI community, and that means we need to be able to develop things quickly. These things, they fit into the common data model, but what we really get from the R development ecosystem is the fact that anyone can come to this with very limited knowledge and quickly apply any scientific expertise they have. And we have people coming from very, very different backgrounds that have done that in the past. So many of the most recent papers in the OHDSI community simply wouldn't have been possible without these tools. And it's not a case of whether we could add these tools into Atlas. It's often the case that these tools were developed specifically for the papers that were published because of them. So, I mean, I think Adam kind of did a good job arguing my point for me, to be honest. And he said that we should have a kind of execution environment for our packages, because if it isn't for our R package and Hades development system, the question I just have is, where should the features and the web tools we have come from? You know, this is where we experiment. This is where we learn new things about our own science. And there's even tools that are just so fundamental to our work that we don't even bother citing them. Things like database connector and SQL render, which seem boring but are actively under development, and always adding new features, new databases that we can connect to, and new systems that we can apply our tools to. And this happens so fast that we don't even really talk about it beyond, you know, our own internal development communities. You know, things like patient level prediction can add new models in a matter of hours if you have the inclination to do so. We have tools that can allow advancements in population level estimation, like cohort method, that are ubiquitous in our studies, and we have developed methods that make papers that were published just a few years ago look like they are very dubious in the claims that they make, because we apply empirical calibration or other methods to just understand confounding. Every day we develop these tools because they are effective and they make it easy to do our jobs. And the rate of change in these tools is so fast that we can't wait for any execution environment or any developers in the Java world to actually kind of support us. We need to just be able to develop them as we see fit. So, for example, on the Hades website, we have 28 methods research papers, 30 clinical research papers, and I expect there are countless more papers that just aren't even listed that have developed these tools. This is a significant underestimate of how much these tools are used. And it isn't actually right to judge science on its successes. What we should judge science on is its failures. Atlas and web UI tools can't be as experimental as our ecosystem. When we develop these tools, we need to be able to fail in a way that means we can throw these lines of code away, these scripts, these utilities we think will be useful. We need to be able to throw them away really quickly. We don't want to have to support them for years. We want to be able to change and adopt new practices. So this process of trial and error is why we are able to build such effective and useful systems for observational research. You know, and web interfaces are great. I've been a web developer for years. I love web development, but good science, you know, it requires messy, hard work. Web interfaces are easy and they are well thought out and well provided. So I'd just like to say, you know, if we don't develop our tools in R, how are we going to develop figures? Because I can't think of a paper that I haven't needed to use, wouldn't have needed to use R and ggplot just to generate the figures. So that's all I'm going to say, is we need to keep developing these tools. And that's my point.
Thank you, JPEG. Adam, JPEG just called you easy. Would you like to take your 2-minute response?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything JPEG is saying, actually. The flexibility and of developing in R and Python is paramount. We can't develop our analytics in Java, I don't think. It's but I think this question about this debate is like, where is the most effort needed? And what we see when we look at the data that Paul has collected from GitHub is like there's an explosion of work going on in the R package world. So there's and the impact there has been huge. But what we see is a real drop off in the work going on in Atlas. So Atlas and Web API, those repositories have over 300 open issues. Okay, there's multiple open pull requests. There's just kind of a real need for a rethinking around what we want this tool to be and what we want this web-based thing to become. What I'm seeing also is that we're juggling these two different worlds. So typically we're using Atlas to develop the cohorts, but then we're porting things into R. Or if you're using Phoebe, for example, you're copying and pasting things back and forth. If we're using cohort diagnostics, you know, you have to jump back and forth between Atlas and R. And so what I think is needed is a really a hard look at like where do we want to take Atlas and the web-based UI toolkit, and how do we leverage all the work that's been done in the R space in this new framework.
All right, thanks, Adam. JPEG, your counter.
Yeah, so I don't disagree that what Adam proposes would be actually a great solution to the problems that we have. Mainly because I completely sympathize with the view that you know, there's a lot of tool sets that are disparate and disconnected, and we want to bring them together. However, my feeling is that to do good data science, we need to be able to use the tools that data scientists use. And I think that kind of trying to build any enterprise ecosystem around our analytics tools would slow us down. And so, whilst I don't want to take away or distract from the wonderful development that does happen in the Atlas side of things, I think from the perspective of those at the cutting edge, we need to think about systems that we can build that work around the R tools that we already have, the Python tools we already have, and actually grow from that perspective. And that doesn't mean excluding you know, web tools and web interfaces. You know, practically every one of our R packages now includes some form of a shiny interface, and we're moving towards, you know, we've using Plumber as a backend for our system so we can deploy them on the web. But these systems, you know, we develop them quickly to solve problems that, you know, maybe need to be solved in 6 months or less. You know, during the pandemic, how many papers did we work on, or how many scientific applications did we work on that needed to be done rapidly? And it wasn't simply possible to wait for any kind of enterprise ecosystem to develop around them. So yeah, it's not an either or, but it's going to be hard to convince an analytic community.
Oh, it's cut off. Well done, both of you. There's some good questions in the chat, so I'm going to take the prerogative to select a question for each of you, and you'll have 1 minute to respond. Adam, one of the questions in the chat was specifically about how we do reproducible science. So the challenge with using web front ends is this idea that we want to be able to go end-to-end in a reproducible process. So how would you respond to prioritizing web bases when one of our goals is reproducibility?
Yeah, I think you have to have a code layer, you know, in the interface. You know, so you have to have we have these layers, and you need to be able to freeze that code. But I think that the JSON analysis specification is a better way to conceptualize our studies than like the R package code packages that we have now. You know, if you like, and I guess for evidence, I would say, think about how often we share cohort definitions across Odysseus Network. We never have any trouble running those cohort definitions and just generating the cohorts or generating like a characterization specification. But if you go to the Odysseus Studies GitHub and you start pulling down GitHub R packages, try to run them in your environment, inevitably you will have trouble running.
Oh, your minute is up, Adam. Sorry, but you got some good points in there. JPEG, your question, somebody asked specifically about how do we really enhance greater adoption in network participation? And so certainly one of the challenges, of course, is R is probably harder to do than clicking through an interface. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I completely appreciate the difficulties that people have in doing network studies with our R packages. Largely, this has been for historical reasons. In R, it's very difficult to understand how to deploy something on an individual's environment, and we are actually working towards solving that problem right now with our strategies package and with other specification packages that allow us to kind of deploy environments to specific submodules and sub components of your studies. So our studies can be specified in JSON, as Adam was talking about, but all of this can be done in R through RStudio interfaces. And then when you have these specifications, this allows reusable components, and it allows modular code that only uses isolated environments that should be a lot easier to deploy. And this is a work in progress. This is something that we're always going to have to keep working on.
But your time is up, so there you go. All right. Thank you, Adam and JPEG, for a riveting debate. Now, the rest of you in the community, you have an opportunity to vote. You can go to pollev.com/PatrickRyan800. You'll now see we're in the post-debate #1, and now you have to get off the fence. If you agree with Adam Black that our priority should be focused on web-based front ends, then you should vote for yes, affirmative, I agree. And if you side with JPEG that we should be instead focusing our R package backend development for advanced large-scale analytics, then you should be voting no, negative, I don't agree. I'm going to give you all a minute here to vote. So make sure that you're voting quickly. Vote early, vote often. This is a battle in the works here. Looking like there's still a slight preference towards web-based tools. All right, I'm going to give you 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. Oh, votes are moving. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. JPEG, congratulations. You have won the debate. While Adam has a majority of the votes, you swayed the most people towards your side. So as Christian alluded to, we will probably do both web and front end development and our package development. But more importantly is the pride you have of knowing that you can lord over our current Titan Award winner and rub it in his face at the symposium in 2 weeks. So thank you, Adam. Thank you, JPEG, for debate number 1.